Welcome to Staples.
Staples Guy, my New Year's resolution is to get new customers in the door.
Well, Staples has everything you need to promote your business. Signs, pens, mugs, you name it.
Perfect.
And right now, you can get 15% off custom banners and posters.
15% off? That's one resolution off my list.
Oh, how many were there?
Just the one.
Then, Happy New Year.
This year, resolve to promote your business at Staples. And right now, get 15% off custom banners and posters. Staples. Make more happen.
Offer ends 3/24/17. See a Staples associate for details.
Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Parenting Aces radio show, sponsored by tennisballs.com, brought to you on Blog Talk Radio's You Are Tennis Network. I'm your host, Lisa Stone, and we're going to jump right into this week's conversation, part 5 of my chats with John Falbo, because we have so much to talk about, and an hour never seems to be enough time. So without any delay, I'm going to just go ahead and bring John right on the line, and we're going to jump in. John, thanks so much for being with us again.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for having me again.
Well, we have a lot to talk about, and so I'm going to just jump right into the meat, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's where I like to be. You know that.
Well, let's start because by the time this episode airs, the Australian Open is going to be long behind us, but because we are pre-recording. But at the beginning of the Australian Open, I'd written an article about how to watch professional tennis matches and what juniors can learn, and there seemed to be a lot of interest in that topic, and I thought, who better to discuss that than you? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how junior players and their parents and coaches, for that matter, can watch professional matches, college matches, even high-level junior matches, and learn from those matches. What are some of the things that they should be watching and looking for and looking at when they're watching these players on the court?
One of the first things that comes to my mind as I listen to that question, Lisa, is, if you examine if anyone who's dealt with people in the law field, attorneys or doctors or dentists or plumbers or electricians, pretty much knows that 90 to 95% are mediocre to average to fairly reasonable, and then there's a 5% area or so, if not less, that are exceptional at what they do. And the reason I say that, and the reason it came to my mind, is because I think in this industry that we're in, this tennis industry, I think there's a lot of fluff out there. And so before even speaking about, I wanted to set a premise before speaking about what to watch and say the hardest job for a parent, a coach, a child coming up is weeding through all of the crap, for lack of a better way to say it, and really getting to some genuine information that is actionable, that you can use, and that will help. Because the problem is there's a lot of, and it's just like any industry, a lot of people want to make money. And that's cool. I got no problem with people making money. That's a good thing. The problem comes in when the information and the quality of the information is sacrificed, and there's not a congruency between one's level of experience and the information that they're trying to portray. Because if that congruency is screwed up, then you're getting information from someone that doesn't understand from whence they came. And so it becomes very errant information. And, it's why a guy like Federer will have Edberg in his corner, and you may edit this out if you like. I'm going to say it because my Facebook posts, that I speak my mind, versus quote-unquote sports psychologist type like a Jim Lair, who really, in my view, has always been a charlatan because he's never competed at a level that would allow him to really understand what's going on at the most pressure-packed moments. And if you don't understand that, if you're just guessing at that and trying to put like a really nice title on it and sell it, it's not going to hold up. Versus somebody like Edberg that's been through countless pressure-packed situations. He knows the gentleness that it takes. He knows the volatility that's there. And so the premise I wanted to set is, in my message to parents, coaches, children playing, people playing, be very careful from whom you get the information, and what kind of information you're inputting, because you can start with an improper premise, and everywhere you go from that point, you're screwed. And so it's like this question with you saying, well, about watching, what's my view on watching? You know, there's a lot of like technical advice out there. There's a lot of people that really fixate on technical stuff. Now, I'm telling you what, when you're at 3-all in the fifth, you ain't thinking about, well, is the angle of my racket head 30 degrees or is it 20 degrees? And where exactly is my pivot foot? And you ain't thinking about any of that. I guarantee you that. You're thinking about, how do I physically survive this? How do I then make sure that I'm making the balls the way I need to, making sure and exploiting that person's weaknesses, making sure and accentuating my own strengths? Because the minute you get caught up in unnecessary fluff, that's all it takes. The margin is so thin with even, really, you want to know the truth of it, the top 2,000 guys in the world and probably the top 1,000 women in the world, the margins are getting so thin that if you spend your time thinking about unnecessary stuff, that's ball game. So
interesting. Yeah, that's true. The margins are ridiculously thin.
Yes.
Even looking at, if you look at collegiate players and look at them compared to some of the, top pros on tour, I mean, they can be on court together and have a competitive match.
Hey, no question. You're on the money because like Ty Tucker at Ohio State, he's got guys on his team that are not only winning rounds in challengers, and no matter what anybody says, people that know the game know these guys in challengers, like Ryan Harrison just won in Dallas last week, I believe. And you got guys in these challengers that the guys, and a lot of guys in futures that are having results. Them on a grander stage and you put them in a bigger money event and they can hold their own and the margins are very, very thin. And so Ty's got college guys that are not only winning rounds, they're winning challengers and singles and doubles. So, and then you got a guy like Ryan Harrison. He's winning challengers. Well, you put Ryan Harrison in any stage in the world and he can compete with anybody in the world. So you take that to, well, he's winning a challenger. You make a correlation. Well, some of Ty's guys are winning challengers. And Ty had a guy, a couple years ago that got up very quickly in the first 200-300 in the world. So that you're on the money. You are on the money. The college competition, in terms of the very best guys, they're finding they can compete with anybody in the world.
So let's get back to, what is it that we can take away from watching these phenomenal athletes in action?
Well, I would simplify it like this for this particular conversation to something that I feel like is most important. If anyone can call up these YouTube videos, okay, and anyone can call up these different matches, okay, and so what I was gonna say is, sorry, I had a momentary interruption there.
No worries.
So what I was going to say is you can call up YouTube and go pull up the Nishikori-Federer match. And the other match I'll briefly talk about is the Zverev-Murray match. But in the Nishikori-Federer match, call up the footage, okay? Watch specifically how Federer identifies Nishikori's weakness, number one, and how Federer is completely in touch with his own strengths, number two. And what you will see, Nishikori has always overcompensated on the forehand side ever since he's been a little guy, 5, 6, 7 years ago, even coming up through. And the reason he does that, the reason he'll whack the ball on the forehand side is because deep down he feels inadequate on that side. And that's the case with a lot of guys. They'll whack the ball really hard, hoping to convince you and sell you that that's a strength. And if you watch over time statistically how many errors they make, usually they'll make more errors on the side they're overcompensating on. So if you watch this footage, Federer knows very well, and Edberg knows very well, that Nishikori's weaker side is on the forehand. And I would ask your listeners and to view this and say, watch how many balls Federer's playing to Nishikori's forehand. Watch how many times he's serving, especially in the sets that he's winning, to Nishikori's forehand. Watch how many times Nishikori will shank the ball. Watch how many times Nishikori will miss forehands. Watch how many times Federer will generate weak balls on Nishikori's forehand. And especially as the match started getting tense and then Federer started pulling away at different points, there was no hiding it. The only time he would go to Nishikori's backhand is to open up the forehand. And over and over and over again, Federer would try to take his forehand as much as possible because that's his strength, other than the serve and knowing how to intimately hold serve with his game. But his forehand side, take that as much as possible and penetrate Nishikori's forehand side as much as possible. And if people will go and watch that footage, they'll be amazed at how much that happens. And from a simple idea of identifying, hey, what's that other guy or gal weak at? Where are they really weak? And that's easier said than done. There are subtleties within that. But where are they really weak? And then where am I really strong? And how do I match those two up? And at all costs, let's make sure and break that weak. Even if I'm not in touch with all of my strengths and know my game and my personality intimately well, how do I break down that weakness over and really relentlessly?
So
and then if you take
ask you this, John. Sorry, let me ask you this, because that's such an interesting way to look at it. And, with all of the technology we have and data collection and all of that now, and especially with the top players on both the men's tour and the women's tour, you would expect that, at least at the very top, the players are going to have access to data on their opponents that should shine a very bright light on strengths and weaknesses in their opponent. So what is the difference when Nishikori comes up against Roger Federer versus the other guys that he's beaten prior to meeting up with Roger in the draw?
There are several differences.
Okay.
Several differences.
Okay.
I'm sorry to cut you off. I'll listen to the rest of your question.
No, go ahead.
The data doesn't reveal the subtleties. In other words, if Nishikori has very difficult time with balls at his waist and above versus at his waist and below, if he has difficulty with balls in on his hip versus stretched way out, balls that would look easy to most everybody watching, right? But balls that are hit penetratingly hard on his hip, So these kind of subtleties, they don't keep. Most of the stats in tennis are very, very mediocre. When you see stats on, they really insult everybody's intelligence with the stats that they put on the major events, like first serve percentage, return percent, all this kind of stuff. There's a few people in tennis that are starting to really pursue worthwhile, in-depth statistical analysis. But it's not really mainstream. And in some other sports, you'd be amazed. You sit down with the stats, and it's like, hey, does this guy like a curveball? Does he like a slider? Does he like it on his hip? Does he like, like in baseball, for instance, does he like it below the knees? Does he like it above the knees? Does he like it down in the dirt? Does he like, where are his hands? There's a ton of statistical analysis. And so the data in tennis that's available, it doesn't really reveal very subtle, specific ideas. That's number one. So their data is many times useless, because if you just say, well, a guy has a weak forehand, that really doesn't tell me anything. So how is it weak? Where is it weak? In what capacity is it weak? It may be counterintuitive how it's weak, and you may have to look and see, hey, he may hit, if you remember in Wawrinka and Federer, and you watched the press conference with Wawrinka afterwards, there was a time at the end of the match there where Federer ran through like 2 or 3 games really quickly, and they had a rally. And Wawrinka thought Federer was going to keep bashing the ball, and Federer he hit a few just very slow loopers. And Wawrinka missed a couple backhands, just boom, boom, just like that. And Federer ran off the next 3 games because what was never talked about was Wawrinka got confused. And once he got confused, Federer hit a few winners, Wawrinka started missing the balls, and after, you'd have to watch a press conference, Wawrinka actually said, yeah, he hit a few looper, like slow balls, and I was like, what's going on here? And what no reporter knew to ask, because they don't know the game well enough, most of them, and what never came out was, once that confusion started for Wawrinka, the margin is so thin, you give Federer that kind of little gap, he's gonna start hitting a few winners. He's gonna penetrate you in ways that you don't really care for and make you very uncomfortable. And then if you're walking around confused, you're done.
That's so interesting, especially for those two guys who have played each other God knows how many times. They know each other's games in and out, and for Federer to be able to find a way to confound Wawrinka and cause him to feel that confusion on the court, I mean, what does that say about Federer's abilities? Holy cow.
Well, yeah, and when the second part of the answer to your question, after the data part was, if these guys know one another so well, and then like you say, Wawrinka and Federer, well, I don't care what anybody says. Like in this conversation we're having, we can pick up on all kinds of analysis, okay, and that's one layer of it. When you're on the court in front of 10, 15, 20,000 people, you're playing for a title that you want, that knows me. You know it means an enormous amount to you personally in terms of your achievement. You know it means a ton to you financially in terms of your achievement. Everything you worked for, all the emotional investment, the psychological, investment that you've made. And then you have your body that's chemically reacting to being through 3 and 4 and 5 sets, and your fatigue and all the mental machinations that you go through with your own fears and then having to overcome those. I mean, you have so many variables when you get under the lights. And if any listeners ever watch any of Floyd Mayweather's stuff, whether you like him or not, one of his main components of what he always says is, all you guys can talk all you want, but when we get under the lights for $30, $40, $50 million and the world is watching, you're a different boxer than you are doing an interview. And so that's a second component when you ask, there's a lot of information. Yes, there's a lot of information. I think the majority of it is useless, okay? And then, so if the majority of the data they're getting is faulty, comprehensive enough, and then you put that together with being on a stage that where everyone is nervous at some point, everyone has anxiety, everyone has fear that they have to overcome. That's the real stuff. You know, anybody can go to a chalkboard and say this, and this. It's like Mike Tyson used to say, everybody's got a game plan until they get punched in the face. You know, then your game plan kind of changes a little bit.
Yeah.
And you're speaking of Federer's ability to adapt. And even in the third, fourth, and fifth set, you're always looking for that little edge. And you're fatigued, and you're trying to push yourself. You're trying to find that edge, you know. And this is the real art of the thing. And something he's one of the best ever at is finding that little area. Could be in the third set, fourth set, fifth set, kind of like in the Super Bowl last week. You know, everyone says Atlanta choked. You look at Tom Brady and you look at how many games they win in the second half, and because they're fitter, because all of their people are assessing weaknesses, and because he can then come in, and once Atlanta's secondary got tired in that fourth quarter, he picked them apart. He can adapt like that, and they can adapt like that. But that is a very difficult thing to do. You have to be very fit, very practiced, and very able to adapt in an arena when you're under the lights. And not everybody can do that. And certainly at different levels, you know, with different people.
Right.
So I hope that answered your question somewhat thoroughly.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. To me, to watch somebody like Federer, even in the men's final, and I have to admit I haven't watched the women's final yet. I will by the time the show airs, but I haven't had a chance to watch it yet. But yeah, the men's final, to see Nadal go up a break in that final set and then not win another game was unbelievable. And then to hear him talk about the match in his press conference after was incredible to me. The guy he's got an amazing way of looking at the game. And, we all talk about Federer and how incredible his win was and all of that, but I encourage people to go back and listen to Nadal's press conference at the end of the match too. And I don't know how he keeps things in the healthy perspective that he does. I suspect it has a lot to do with his family and his coaching and all of that. Yeah, but I mean, it's unbelievable to hear this guy talk about a heartbreaking loss like that.
Yeah, and that's the way that he can respond. And your idea that you just gave everyone is something I do constantly. I watch a lot of footage of matches, but I listen to a ton of pre-match interviews, especially post-match interviews, to see, because you can tell a lot about a guy with how he responds. And there's a lot of really cohesive, cogent moments after the match where even though they're being asked questions that many times are not very specific, some questions just kind of sneak in there in a way that they're better than what the person asking them knows, because they hit on something that the person would have thought about in depth, and then you get those kind of answers, and you can glean an enormous amount in terms of what your mindset needs to be when you're walking on the court, when you're dealing with victory, when you're dealing with defeat, because you're going to have both all the time, and the interviews are really, really key to watch. Just as key to me as the matches.
Well, that's a great point, and especially now with YouTube, all of those interviews are available and so easy to find, and so I want to encourage the listeners to have your kids watch these interviews of some of their favorite players, not just after the player has won a match, but maybe even more importantly after they've lost, and to get a feel for how these top professionals handle defeat and how they keep things in perspective and don't fall apart. And, you know, those are attributes that will serve our kids well no matter what they do in their future, whether it's on a tennis court or in a boardroom.
Well, and I would humbly suggest, and it takes time, you cannot be a parent who reads a book during the match. You cannot be a parent that finds diversion in talking to other people during the match. It takes some time and some focus. But if you're spending all this money on lessons and travel and hotel and all this stuff, okay, if you want a vacation, I can think of a lot better ways. Go to Cabo, go to Grand Cayman, go to Europe, go somewhere for a week or two with a focused vacation and just vacation. If you're out for a vacation, tennis is not the place to be. Now, if you're gonna spend these kind of resources and this kind of energy, there's one very fundamental thing you can do as a parent that will help your child enormously. It will help you bond with them. It will help you in your learning about the game. It will help you help them. It will help them help you. It will help you help yourself. It will help you help your coach and vice versa. And that is, take your phone and video segments of your child's match. And I'm not talking a point or two. I'm talking as much as your particular phone can tolerate. I'm talking 8 to 10 minute segments where you get how your child reacts in between points, where you get how they play points, what the opponent's doing, what they're doing. And when your child sees this and they see their behavior or they see their energy in between points or they see their strategic flaws during points, it opens up a whole new world, because what it injects, you know, a lot of the people in this industry function on emotion. They function on theory. And that's why there's a top tier of people that make the majority of the money and everybody else kind of scraps for the rest. Because when you're functioning on theory, you're guessing. You're guessing. And this is not a guessing game. It's hard enough as it is. You don't want to be guessing at the things that you can control. And when you take that video of your child and you have concrete evidence of the fact that either they were behaving poorly or their energy was too low or too high in between points, or that strategically they weren't in the ball game in terms of their mind and what they were trying to do, and you have that footage and you can watch it with them, not in a condescending way, but like, okay, here's what you thought happened and here's what really happened. And then you can sit with a coach and watch that, and you can watch it yourself in your own time, away from everybody. You're educating yourself at that point, and you're dealing with concrete, real, practical, actionable information. It's one of the top things any parent can do. Take the phone and video 8 to 10 minute segments. Even if you don't know anything about the game, you'd be amazed at how much you can learn about the game. The first thing my dad ever told me, not knowing anything about tennis, he just loved athletics and he understood sports. He was like, John, just hit it where they ain't.
Oh, if it were only so simple.
I was like, I wish you would come out here and try to do that when I'm dealing with all this stuff. But the basic idea, as you further yourself in your skills, it becomes more clear that, yeah, you need to hit it where they ain't. You know? You don't have to be a rocket scientist. Yeah, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to take video, and even if you are a rocket scientist, it will help you simplify things, because you take that video and you see what's happening. You see with your own eyes, and it helps you, it helps your child, it helps the coach, it helps everybody. And if you're going to be investing this money, let's do some practical things instead of doing what sounds good, you know, like, again, have the racket at a 30-degree angle. Let's all be concerned with our pivot foot. All these things that sound intelligent that are really pseudo-intellectual, let's do some practical stuff that can really help us. You know, let's assess, hey, what's really going on the court? What are my child's strengths? What are his opponents or her opponents' weaknesses? And how do we attack those? And how do we attack those relentlessly in this arena? Because ultimately, everybody gets, you know, yes, you should do your best. Yes, you should be reasonably treated. Of course, these are given. But at the end of the day, after those premises are laid firmly in place, your job is to win. And it's not about getting a participation medal like you and I have talked about before. Your job when you go out there, beyond the premise of doing your very best, playing within the rules, doing these very basic, having these very basic parameters, your job is to win. You're going out there to win. And if that gets lost in the sauce, then doing your best and all this other stuff, it gets lost in the sauce too. You can't be honest about that you do not like to lose and that you do like to win. Well, then you can get around to playing 1 point at a time. You can get around to genuinely doing your very best and being better each time you go out in terms of your skills. You can get around all that stuff. And what that video does is it helps you get to reality very quickly. Because in my experience, walking around every day, be it at the tennis courts, dealing with any business I've ever dealt with, the most difficult part of dealing with anyone, be it a child, a friend, anyone, is getting them into the reality phase. Because if they're in the past or the future and they're saying what if and all this other stuff, you don't even have a conversation. You're in a speculative environment at that point. And until we get to reality and we address what's going on and accept that, we really got no move from there.
That is
so
very
we
true.
We have to be in reality. As painful as it is, as uncomfortable as it is, we can at least move from there. And what that video does is it puts you point blank straight into reality. Mm-hmm. You know, if your child's overweight and he's moving really slowly and it's affecting his play, it's right there on camera. If your child is acting like a little spoiled ass and it's right there on camera, it's easy to see. If your child is weak on the backhand side and is being exploited and beaten because the backhand is weak, it's right there on camera. It gets you to reality immediately. So that would be a humble suggestion of mine.
Yeah. Are you of the mindset, John, that this is videotaping matches is something that parents should start as soon as their kids start playing competitively?
Yes.
You know, that this is something, that even with the youngest kids, that they can learn from watching these.
Yeah, and you know, I don't coach per se on an individual basis unless it's someone that is playing, for instance, in the first probably 20 or 30 in the world, and they want very specific, private, that no one will ever know about, that type of consulting. But when I'm at the courts training every day, there are kids practicing and playing, and just the other day, there was a guy with his daughter. She was like 6, and she was hitting balls, you know, off the dropping the ball and hitting it. And he came over, and they were watching me practice for like 30 minutes. And I was like, wow, these people have been gracious enough to take their time to watch. You know, what can I give? How can I help? And so I went over and asked him. I said, hey, you know, is there any way that I can help? I'm not going to get out on the court. That's the local pros' job, and that's what they're good at, and that's their money. I'm not going to, you know, take money off their table, and that's not my job. But how can I help? And he said, well, if there was one thing you could suggest, what would you suggest? And I went and got my phone, and I pointed to it, and I said, video her. Every lesson, video her. Every practice, video her. And then take her home, pull up YouTube, so you've got a match of a player that she likes, and then put your phone beside of it, so you've got her. Go to the match, watch the match a little bit, talk about the match, go to her, watch her stuff, talk about her, let her visualize all of this with her favorite player and with her own strokes, her own shots, and I guarantee you she'll sleep on it, then have her go hit on a wall. It might drive you crazy, but have her hit on a wall of like a bedroom or a garage or something like that. And as she gets a better feel of the racket in her hand, and then she's seeing the video in her mind, every lesson she does, you will be maxing the money you're spending. You'll be maxing out, because it won't just be about what the coach says at that point. You'll be coming in with artillery in her mind. You'll be coming in with her having seen this shot over and over again, seeing the type of player she wants to be, seeing her athleticism. And then that makes your improvement exponential at that point. Problem in this country with players developing, and why they've developed so slowly, and why there's been such a drought of American players at the very highest level, and even the depth of American players, why it's been so sketchy, is because the rate of progress, quite frankly, sucks. And part of the reason it sucks is there's not enough dynamic movement in that process. There's got to be a lot of play. There's got to be a lot of watching play. There's got to be a lot of thinking about play. It's very, very mental at the best level, and you're constantly visualizing your own game, other people's games, what you want to improve, how you want to play, how you can best win. It's a very dynamic process. So this gentleman, after they had watched practice, I just picked up the phone, explained to him what I just said, basically, and paraphrased, and he looked at me and he was like, "We'll do it. We'll definitely do it. That's something we can do." And I think it is something that everybody can do, no matter what your level is. When you're getting visual feedback like that in reality, your mind won't help but be able to deal with it and help you improve.
That's awesome. I mean, we've talked a lot in the past on this show about coaches videotaping players and watching video, and, what to do when it's a rain day and you can't be on the courts, and how that's a great time to pull up video and discuss it with the kids, and, what do you see, and those types of things. But from what you're saying, you even take it a step further and say, well, yeah, it'd be great if the coaches did that. But really, the parents can and should be doing it. And it's so simple now, especially with our phones, that there's really no reason not to.
And here's the deal, Lisa. Not knowing what you're doing is not a good enough excuse, because you can be dumber than a box of rocks about tennis, and if you watch enough through the video, through matches, through YouTube, if you watch enough, you can start to get a very good sense of the basic fundamentals of what it's going to take to win. Now, yes, there is specific knowledge that has to be obtained along the way. There's no question about that. But part of the reason of this slow development in this country is you've got a log jam of people with a bunch of the best word I know is charlatans, that are down on the low end of the spectrum, that are providing all this useless information, and people are log jammed down there with them, and there's no movement. It's just static as hell. It's not dynamic whatsoever. And as you get more parents video, and as you get more parents understanding the game, and then you get the parents interacting with the children. So this is what our generation did constantly, and we didn't have phones, but the parents were so interactive. They were always watching other people's matches. The kids were always interacting about the matches, always thinking about, hey, what's the best thing I can do? What's the best thing this person can do? And now with video, and we would need video cameras, but we essentially use our minds in this way. And as you use the video cameras, you begin to use your mind and your creativity and your imagination. So you're playing reels of film in your head constantly. And as you do this, then the log jam of crap at the low end of the spectrum, you start to realize, well, that really doesn't have anything to do with anything. It's just there because people are trying to make what they feel is a living, and that's cool, that's their right. But in terms of having anything to do with achieving excellence, it has almost nothing to do with it. So the sooner we can get you from a beginner to the process of a professional, if you start there, there's no reason every player can't start with the process of a professional. Doesn't mean you're going to act like that or you're going to play like that immediately. But if you start with the process of a professional, then you're going to do different things than if you start in that logjam of mediocrity. Your whole approach changes. Your whole path changes. And you just do different things. You train differently. You choose your tournaments differently. You choose your coaches differently. You go about your days differently. The whole thing is different. And so I would encourage, it doesn't matter to me if your child is 6 and they're just beginning. Think about it as a professional. What would a professional do? I guarantee you that one of the things that will come to their mind is, hey, it would be good to watch some matches on YouTube. It would be good to video some practices or some matches and check them out. And so, but please don't let that, you say, well, I don't know what I'm talking about. That's okay. What you might not understand is 80 to 90% of the people that are trying to give you information don't really know what they're talking about either. So it's not like you're not really that far behind the 8 ball. And
right.
It's not,
right.
and if it can help you bond with your child, let's say that's the only thing that came out of it. Let's say you knew nothing about tennis and your child knew nothing about tennis and everybody was just sitting there, right? Like dead hay in a field. Let's say that was like the level of intelligence. You still get a lot out of it because you're getting to know your child better. Your child's feeling like, hey, this is actually kind of cool because everybody's getting to bond in a way where you become closer. And in my view, only good things can come of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's segue because we're reaching the last quarter hour of our conversation. And okay. One of the things you mentioned in the videotaping that gets captured is the player's behavior on the court, their energy, their emotional control or lack thereof. And some news that I got today that I thought was really interesting, and again, I apologize that we're pre-recording this a couple weeks before it's actually airing, so this may be old news by the time this airs, but USTA Oklahoma just instituted a zero-tolerance policy for junior tournaments in terms of on-court behavior, and that bad behavior results in immediate suspension from tournament play. And I have very conflicted views toward this policy, and I'm really curious to hear what you think about it, and also kind of comparing it to the policy at the collegiate level about excessive cheering, jeering, etc. What are your thoughts?
I think it's all a joke, and I'll go into that. But I think it's all a joke. I think it's people sitting behind a desk making choices that they have no idea about. Let's take the game back because these people most of them are historically ignorant too. Let's take the game back to the great Australians that usually behaved very well. They were extremely fit in the 50s and 60s. The Rod Lavers, the Lou Hodes, the Kenny Rosewalls, Fred Stolleys, John Newcomb's precedent of good behavior and fitness. Then let's take it then, who comes along? Well, Ely Nastasi comes along, and Jimmy Connors comes along, and John McEnroe comes along. And the level of growth in the game multiplies exponentially. Why? because it's nice to have well-behaved fellas out there that are fit and doing their best and in all white and things like that. That's one component of the game. That's a necessary component of the game. It's also real nice to have a guy with long hair come out that's not really dressed so tidy, that uses some different kind of strings, that's cursing sometimes, that's showing a little bit of flair, that's grunting, that's sweating, that's talking to the audience. This is another contrast in an art form that needs contrast in order to sell tickets. Also, in order to be appealing, I'm talking to everybody, okay? I'm talking to everybody listening to you as human beings. Okay, when you go to work some days, are you feeling like jovial and like you should be behaving just exquisitely? Hell no. You got stuff on your mind. You got something might have happened with your kids or your spouse, or you might have a boss that's a complete ass, and you got to okay, you're not going to go postal on everybody, true, but we're in an arena in tennis where that's not an option. You're just not going to go postal and start shooting people. That's not an option in tennis. You have parameters. You have lines, you have scoring rules, you have very clear parameters. So if going postal is not an option, everything else, you're not harming anybody. You're not harming their property. So to have different personalities, to have different things going on is a plus for the game. And when you think about the greatest American players that have ever lived, people can talk about how Pete might have been boring, but if you watch Pete's fire on a daily basis and a weekly basis, and you watch how he got up in some of those umpires' grill when they would fall asleep up there, basically, and be costing him in some cases several $1 million, and you look at him in his eyes, you're going to see a lot of intensity. And with the greatest players that have ever come from America, you see an enormous amount of intensity. And to attempt to take that away through some crossing guard, elementary school type ruling, I can tell you a year ago, I was cheering for the Kansas team, the women's team, and the college. I mean, we've seen things in college. There will be whole fraternities and sororities, especially the fraternity guys, will come out at other schools, and they'll break every rule you could ever imagine. They will go berserk. Guys in Viking hats, sometimes half drunk. They're breaking every rule you could ever imagine. So I'm going by the rules. But I'm being loud. I'm being boisterous. I'm rooting for my squad, that's part of the fun. And the head umpire comes over and says, you're going to have to be quiet or you can leave. You're going to have to leave. I said, do you own the property?
This is at a college match?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. His name is Bob, and I won't say his last name unless he offends me again this weekend. If he offends me again this weekend, you and I'll have a whole different interview to do. But I said, do you own this property? And he said, well, no. I said, do you run the city that taxes this property? And he said, no. And he put his hands up and he said, but for this period of time, I control all of this. And I looked him in the eye and I said, you got to be shitting me. Pardon my French. But you really have to be kidding me, right? I said, here's what's going to happen. You're going to go back and do whatever it is you do, because I haven't figured out what you do yet, because you're being paid, and I still haven't figured out, because I just saw you eating some pizza over there while these girls are competing their asses off. So you go back and do whatever it is you do. I'm going to continue to cheer the way I want to cheer. And if you come back and threaten me again, I'm going to sue you personally, not the USTA. You can't hide behind an organization. I'm going to sue you personally because I'm not breaking any rules. I'm rooting for my squad. You are what's wrong with the game. If we were in Allen Fieldhouse at KU with 20,000 people screaming. Do you know the kind of things that are said in that building to referees and players and everything else? We're in an athletic, this came from gladiators. This is where this originated, in arenas. This is sport. It's athletics. It's competition. Don't expect me to be behind a desk with a pencil with a little latte and being all calm and concise. It's emotional. That's what's so appealing, because as human beings, we have emotion. And to try to take that out of play is simply stupid, in my view. And it's a joke, because it's what I like about sports. It's what everybody I know loves about sport. And so it's simply foolish, in my view, Lisa. And if people aren't harming other people or their property, you let them play. And you see what comes out of it, and it creates drama, and it creates tragedy, and it creates beauty, and it plays out. Can you imagine if we were to go see a movie and there were all these parameters? Nobody would like movies. And so, and they do it under.
Do you think that that's contributing to the decline of popularity of the sport?
No question. And that's why with this particular guy and any other umpire I encounter, they're going on our terms. You have to be knowledgeable enough, and you have to be ballsy enough to set the terms, because they're trying to set terms on the sport, and they're trying to set terms on you. And if you know what you're doing, and if you're equipped, they have nothing. They have no power. But what they do, like in many different parts of society, they try to intimidate, they try to bully, and many times they're not nearly as informed as you can be as a player, as a spectator, as a parent, as a fan. And you have to come equipped. And yes, if they think that tennis is going to compete, basketball, football, cricket, soccer. Have you ever seen an 80,000-person soccer stadium over in England or Spain? And what? People are going to just be real jazzed about coming and seeing some kind of BS zero tolerance policy where you're having a bunch of automatons walking around hitting little yellow balls. Are you kidding me? When people have movies to choose from, they can go see comedians, they can go see concerts where somebody like Chris Brown is taking off his shirt within 5 minutes and he's sweating like crazy, and Justin Bieber's letting his pants sag to his ankles. And they think people are going to come and watch two automatons come and hit the ball. They're shrinking their audience day by day. And the problem is the people that are doing it, like a USTA official or an umpire, they don't get paid squat. They're doing this out of their political ambition or their whatever their personal agenda is. They're not thinking of the business of the sport, the survival of the sport, the well-being of the sport, and most importantly, the enjoyment of the sport for those who participate in it and for those who watch. So I've got zero tolerance for their mentality.
Interesting.
Zero.
So let's extrapolate this a little bit. And again, this is old news by the time this airs, but the Canada-Great Britain Davis Cup match, and where the 17-year-old Shapovalov hit a ball in anger and hit an official in the eye and was immediately defaulted and fined $7,000 and has publicly and privately apologized for his actions. And I don't think anybody would take issue with the fact that he should have been fined. The official was injured, and that's never okay. But it's interesting to read kind of the conversations that have gone on around this, that, he should have been kicked out of the game. That was absolutely inexcusable. And to me, as a parent, and more importantly, I guess, the parent of a male, this was a 17-year-old kid playing in the fifth rubber. His entire country is watching to see if he's going to be able to take his country to the next level of Davis Cup play. And his emotions got the better of him. I don't excuse his behavior, and I definitely feel like he should be punished, but I certainly understand what happened out there.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you have, before I answer this, because I have a detailed answer, we're coming to the end of the time. And do you have the ability to extend 5 minutes on your podcast? Do you have that ability, or do we need to wait until next week? Okay.
No, I have the ability.
Okay. Are you willing to do that?
Yes, even though we are recording on my birthday and I'm waiting for birthday dinner, but that's okay. I have 5 more minutes for you, John.
I will save it. I'm happy to save it.
No. Let's do it. I want to hear what you think.
And happy birthday, by the way.
Thank you.
And I won't ask you. You can text me what you're eating, but I hope you have a good meal, because to me, food is the best part of the birthday to me. But so I will keep it brief. I will keep it brief. To give you an idea, a story relating. In the home that I live in, I had an RV. I parked it out in front of my home for approximately 48 hours. Okay? A neighbor comes down, and we have an ordinance where you have to move, which I did respectfully. Even when I moved it, the neighbor comes down and says, goes in hard like you're talking about with Shapovalov. I'm going to call the police. I'm going to make sure you get ticketed. I'm going to do. Hey, man, I'm just loading up the RV, and I'm trying to get it out of here as quickly as possible because I know the rules. That doesn't matter to me. You should be banned from having any cars on the streets. And I finally had enough. And I took him by the collar, and I said, he was about 60, and I said, listen to me. You're going in this hard on me about a car. You're going in this hard on me about a parking spot. When I've told you exactly what my intentions are, I've been honest with you. Now, meanwhile, his eyes are like, he's scared beyond belief, which I wanted him to be, because he was trying to be a bully. And I said, so you're being this hard on me with a car. So we're going to flip it around. What happens if we go to your accountant and we take a look at your tax returns for the last 10 years? Are we going to find any indiscretions there? And you want me to go in as hard on you about something important as you just went in on me about a car and about a parking spot and about a ridiculous 48-hour ordinance so you don't have to see my RV? Because I think we should take a trip to your accountant. I think we should check out those tax returns, and then I can go in as hard on you. And I let him go, and he, skipped away. The next day, he came and knocked on my door. He said, you know what? That was really screwed up on my part. I just wanted to apologize. Because he went back and thought about how stupid he was being and how irrational he was being, and he thought about his own indiscretions, which I already knew about, and he weighed it up. And then he made a common sense choice to act with some humanity. Now, I appreciate you extending here because this relates, and it came immediately to my mind, and how it relates is this. Anyone saying that this boy who made a mistake, okay, his mistake was hitting the ball in anger and losing his composure, losing his poise. He got unlucky in that he didn't aim for the umpire. I know the people that manage and are around this boy. He played a challenger in Memphis last year with a guy named Keith Evans that runs it and trains people down in Memphis. He won that challenger. I know him to be a reasonable boy. He's a reasonable dude trying to make his way in the game and trying to develop a livelihood for himself. Did he lose his poise? Absolutely. Was that a mistake? Yes, it was. He got unlucky in that he never hit the ball at the umpire. He was hitting it up in the stands, and he misfired. Now, he definitely didn't mean to hit the guy in the eye and the upper cheek, which he did, okay? He definitely didn't mean to harm the guy, okay? So you take everything into account. I understand the fine. I even understand the default because it did hit the guy in the face, okay? I understand the default. But when you start taking it above and beyond and say, well, he ought to be banned from the game. He got unlucky. He made a mistake, and then that mistake, it compounded because of some misfortune, because there's no way he was aiming for the guy. And when you're not able, when you think so linearly and so foolishly that you say, well, mistake, zero tolerance, kick him out of the game, you are a very ignorant individual because life doesn't work like that. Life is very dynamic. A lot of things are open to context and interpretation. And if you don't have the intelligence and the mental skills to work through that or the patience to dissect that and digest that and then come up with some alternate solution, then you're really not a very intelligent person in my view. So to say that he should be banned from the game is ridiculous. But this is the kind of mentality that we're dealing with. And what I would say, the reason I told you the previous story, what I would say to these people, if they ever approach me like that personally, is, you know what, we're going to flip it around on you. I'm going to make sure I know about some of your key mistakes in your life, because everybody has them. And then we're going to see what the most excruciating punishment is for you possible, and we're going to make sure that happens. We're going to make sure that happens legally. We're going to make sure that happens financially. We're going to hold you to the cross like you're trying to hold this guy to the cross. Now, you go back and you think about your indiscretions and your mistakes. Think about someone holding you to the cross like this. And then you come back tomorrow and let's have a different conversation. So that's what I wanted to relate to you, and I appreciate you spending the time a little bit.
Absolutely. Well, let's end there because dinner is waiting for me, and I'm guessing it's waiting for you too. So thanks so much for being on the show again, John, and I look forward to next month, and we'll have to come up with some equally engaging topics to tackle. So thanks for being with me again.
Good, Lisa. And happy
Perfect.
birthday again, and I hope you have a delicious dinner.
Thank you so much. To the listeners, thank you for tuning in, and thank you to our sponsor, tennisballs.com. We couldn't do it without you. See you next week on Parenting Aces.
If you own a small business, it's not a question of if some hacker is going to attempt to attack your company. It's a question of when. Let cyberpolicy.com keep you safe. CyberPolicy is the first end-to-end solution that combines cyber planning, security, and insurance. With CyberPolicy, your business will be protected against cyber attacks for as little as 40 cents a day. Visit cyberpolicy.com today and get a quote in just 4 minutes. cyberpolicy.com.
Welcome to Staples.
Staples Guy, my New Year's resolution is to get new customers in the door.
Well, Staples has everything you need to promote your business. Signs, pens, mugs, you name it.
Perfect.
And right now, you can get 15% off custom banners and posters.
15% off? That's one resolution off my list.
Oh, how many were there?
Just the one.
Then Happy New Year.
This year, resolve to promote your business at Staples. And right now, get 15% off custom banners and posters. Staples. Make more happen.
Offer ends 3/24/17. See a Staples associate for details.